Leslie Newbegin was a missionary in India for many years. When locals were asked, what did you appreciate about Newbegin? They would say, he learned our language. He was not full of himself, and he participated in our daily life together. That alone is instructive. But sometimes people from outside of India would come and ask Newbegin, how is the church going? And Newbegin would get frustrated at that question. And he was frustrated because he wanted to then provide a theologically accurate answer to those who were inquiring. And so he spent some time and thought about it, and the next person that asked, how is the church doing in India? He replied, straight-faced, very sober, I believe Jesus rose from the dead. Therefore, the question does not arise. With regard to a fact, one is not optimistic or pessimistic. One is either believing or unbelieving. I don't know what I would respond in that moment when he said that to me. The idea is not that we become apathetic, but the fact that the end is decided, that the gates of hell will not prevail with the Church of Jesus Christ, gives us a sober yet joyful confidence to persevere in the work that God has entrusted to us. Today, we are going to be looking at God's calling for us in the ministries of reconciliation. Those first two words are very important. It is God's calling. It is not ours. It wasn't our idea. He is the one who wrote it, and he is the one who has commissioned us to do it. And this ministry of reconciliation is universal for all Christians. 2 Corinthians 5 makes it clear. It's not a ministry for socially minded Christians, whatever that means. So what is this ministry of reconciliation? How do we define it? In Mosaic, we often talk about reconciliation as not a program, but it's an invitation to a journey in the context of a much larger story that we've already hinted at and prayed through. Roughly 2,000 years ago, an angel appeared to a doubly marginalized group of shepherds in the field and proclaimed to them, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all people. From that moment on, God crossed the border from heaven to earth, incarnate in Jesus Christ, who in turn crossed governmental, cultural, religious, ethnic, and gender boundaries in the fulfilling of his purpose. His purpose, that glorious purpose, singular yet multifaceted in the fulfillment of what was to be what we call the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is matchless in its beauty, in its power, and in its scope. It's why each of us is here today in this room. It's why each of us are here today studying at an institution whose motto is entrusted with the gospel. Entrusted with the gospel. How then shall we live? My proposal for us today is that reconciliation provides a framework that is big enough through which we can understand Jesus' purpose and in turn our purpose in Christ. I have a little PowerPoint that'll guide us through. In our short time together, and it is short, we're just going to scratch the surface. But my small goal is to provide and to sketch a framework for us as a community. We're going to explore 4 purpose statements of Jesus, what he accomplished, and what it means for us as a community at TEDS. As a side note, it is it's a wonderful exercise to search the scriptures for these purpose statements about Jesus. And what I mean by purpose statement is Jesus says, I came for this reason, or Jesus came for this reason, an explicit purpose statement about Christ. And we'll explore 4 of them. There are many, many more. But what it does is it just gives you this wonderful, multifaceted picture of that singular gospel that we've been entrusted with. So the first movement, we'll start in Mark 10, Matthew 20. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. let it be said here, there is nothing better than salvation. That we have been ransomed, justified, reconciled, adopted, sanctified, glorified in the matchless work of the cross of Jesus Christ. There is nothing like it. Do you remember that moment when you were first saved? Do you remember the moment when you first felt that touch of the love of God in Jesus Christ? Do you remember your response? That gratitude, that God, could you love me? Where would we be without the love of God in Jesus Christ? This gratitude was the start of that first response to God in the Christian life. And not only that, this gratitude becomes the sustaining motivation for life in ministry. And I have to pause here because this needs to be said in this room. There are many motivations for ministry and many good motivations for ministry. Some of us have seen deep pain. Some of us ourselves have experienced pain. And pain and anger is a wonderful motivation for ministry. Things are not the way they're supposed to be. But I promise you, it will not sustain you. It will, if we're not careful, consume us. The only sustaining motivation for ministry that will take us through the long haul is gratitude for the love of God expressed in Christ Jesus. Some of you may think that this is elementary, but I hope you may consider keeping a gratitude journal. Something to keep record of what you're thankful for. Brain science has actually showed us that the practice of gratitude creates possibilities and capacity in our brains to receive and to give joy, to be more relationally connected with God and with others. So as we practice gratitude, we actually change. Our brain is rewired. I told this to one of my friends one time. He's like, well, Philippians 4 just says that, and you could just believe the Bible. And I was like, that is true. It's cool that brain research backs up the Bible, but, just the simple statement, rejoice always, and with all that you are carrying, present your requests to God with thanksgiving. This idea of being relationally connected moves us to the second movement, Ephesians 2. Jesus' purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two. This is very profound. This is very striking. His purpose was to create one new humanity out of the two. He explains to his disciples that the world will literally and visibly see the gospel through the visible unity of the church. When I read John 17, it seems to me that Jesus is connecting visible unity with evangelism, the reason the Father sent the Son. Unity and evangelism together. And for a second, I thought, well, someone might accuse me, does that sound like a liberal idea? The pursuit of unity actually has evangelistic. So I went to a famous New Testament scholar who recently retired from here, who is not liberal. And I thought I would look what he wrote about this verse in his commentary on John. And sure enough, unity and evangelism, our visible witness to the world, is linked to the work of how people will see the Father sending the Son. Logically, however, this presents a very big problem for us here today in the United States. I talked about Newbegin at the beginning. He said this: the disunity of the church is a public denial of the sufficiency of Christ. He would say, we preach a gospel that's powerful enough to reconcile sinners to a holy God, yet remains impotent to reconcile people across cultural differences. He says we've undercut ourselves from the beginning. And it can get closer to home as well for us who preach the gospel, yet remain unforgiving to those people who are difficult to love in our environment, in our family. But to the positive side of the creation of a new humanity, I'm so grateful to God for this space, a space where we can learn together, where we can grow together, where we can demonstrate that visible unity. Sometimes we have visitors that come to Mosaic Gathering. And last year, a visitor came, and when he left, he remarked, "How is it that that space is so filled with grace and hospitality?" He said, "I've visited other places where we talk about these very divisive issues of the world, and it's yelling matches. It's people don't listen to each other. How is it that this space, people listen with love and with grace and even with reproof?" I think it's a testimony to the grace of God and a testimony to each one of you and your submission to the lordship of Christ, that you will seek the good of the other, that you will listen to understand, as our table values talk about, and then speak to serve. I think it's a gift to have this space, and I wanted to name that here because a lot of people graduate from here and say, "I never knew how special this space was until I left here." We have a chance to form friendships, to form bonds in the context of that new humanity, and then to be sent out in this ministry of reconciliation. I would address the term racial reconciliation, but if we want to get there in Q&A, we can, because we've got to move on. Third, Jesus said, "I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." Now this, of course, could be interpreted in many different ways, but at the very least, it means that internally we holistically flourish in who God has made us to be, that we will embody that reality of God with us, his kingdom within us. Later this semester, Sarah Shin will guide us through reflections on redeeming our ethnic identity journey. It should be a very powerful time of understanding that reconciliation with self, which is in itself a part of sanctification, where more and more we accept ourselves and who God's made us to be, so that uniquely we may bring our whole selves to the conversation, even as we try to embody the new we, which is one of our table of values as well. I experienced this summer. I had found profound healing over my identity as a man. My confession to you is I've always been uncomfortable at men's retreats at church. I have this narrative in my head of "you're weak. You're not a man. You're not a real man. You're weak." And so when I'm around other strong men, I fade into the background. I feel insecure and I feel intimidated. So at men's retreats, I always feel isolated. And so I've usually have gone reluctantly or haven't gone, but it's a part of myself that I knew needed healing. I went on this men's retreat, and the men that I told you intimidate me most are big guys, because I'm kind of skinny. So that's part of my insecurity, despite the most wonderful efforts of my amazing wife, who feeds me and cooks the best food that there is. By the way, I am so blessed to be married to this amazing woman of God. I love you. But I'm skinny, so the big guys, the big guys are the guys that intimidate me, and especially if they have big beards, and if they have like full tattoos, full sleeves, and I went to Texas for this men's healing retreat, and the first guys that met me were that exact description. And I was like, oh man, here we go. All my insecurities are coming up. But what happened there is that they didn't have a one-dimensional view of manhood. They were able to embrace the sensitivity, the compassion, the assertiveness, the full picture that Jesus shows what a man ought to be. And then here's the thing. These men that I was most intimidated by were the ones that started to call out strength in me. Were the ones that would see beyond my insecurities and say, no, I call out this in you. And what happened in that time was there was some healing around my own identity. The self-acceptance just increased. Like I didn't have that self-hatred around my gender anymore. And I've been able to see more and more freedom that's come about as a result of it. My prayer, especially over this next year, many of us have those negative scripts that run through our minds around gender, around race and ethnicity, around where we grew up, around things that happened or things that we've done. Whatever it is, we have negative scripts. And my prayer, and I ask you to join, is for God to interrupt those false narratives and to replace it with the truth that you are loved, you are valued, you are seen, and you are known in this space. And as I mentioned in the retreat, God uses us, one another, to facilitate that healing. So as we go on this journey together, may it be that we find abundant life individually and as a community. I want to move on to our fourth point. 1 John 3. Do I love this verse? 1 John 3. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. You can't get a better purpose statement than that. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. God is reconciling all things in Christ. Colossians 1. Every power, every principality are all under the feet and the authority of Christ. We can read the ending of the story. We flip through the scriptures and we know the end. All things under subjection to God, all things being made new. So what bothers me in this ministry is it seems to me sometimes Christians are on the defensive, that we react, that we want to respond to what's happening, when in reality, we're on the offensive. We're the ones who know the end and have been entrusted with the authority to live and to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ in its full majesty. I know that spiritual warfare is real. My wife and I, we listen to a preacher who has this saying that we've adopted in our life. He says, I live unimpressed by the enemy. We know it's real. We suit up in Ephesians 6, but we don't give the enemy power that he doesn't have. We don't give in to fear. And we stand with the victorious Christ who will one day come again. And that's where our confidence comes from. As we embark on this journey together, as you look on our schedule and the topics we have, there are many works of the devil that need to be taken down and overcome. We don't always know them. They're hidden. And it takes discernment to know what does this look like to stand in the name of Christ. But as I look at these topics, one seems to stand out above the rest. I'll get to that in just one second. We have three options in responding to this scripture. One is with the authority God's entrusted to us, we have direct confrontation. Second, we have prayer. And prayer has been defined, as Dr. Cha often signs an article in his class by David Wells. Prayer is a rebellion against the status quo. We don't have to accept this world as it is. Prayer is our ministry to see it change because God is the one at work. Third, the indirect method, that we can create a community that intentionally shows that the idol has no power over us, over our communities. And so indirectly, we can invite people into another way of life. Now, the ideological idol that to me stands out above all of the rest as we look at this scripture, or as we look at our schedule together, is the ideology of white supremacy. White supremacy has infiltrated just about every institution, including our government, our schools, our churches, and indeed seminaries. It's corrupted our minds. It's corrupted our hearts in conscious and unconscious ways. The very land that we stand on right now has been shaped by the ideology of whiteness in the North Shore. What does it look like for us to respond? What does it look like for us to stand in the authority? But with the zeal of the reformers like Josiah and Hezekiah, the idol of the ideology of white supremacy must be eradicated, it must be exposed, and it must be taken down in the name of Jesus. It must be rebuked, it must be repudiated, and it must be in every way renounced in every aspect of our lives and in our community. All while not demonizing white people. We need to expose it, and we need to work together, especially with this multi-ethnic community, to not demonize those of us from a lighter hue. Those of us that are melanin challenged. And white people, we must not hate ourselves, but engage in the work. Submit to and collaborate with people of color for the end of the kingdom of God. We have that opportunity here, and we can go through it together. At the end of the day, every gap between what is and what ought to be needs to have Christians standing to close it, to pray and to labor toward God's kingdom come, that we become the fulfillment of Jesus' prayer to see thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. See that gap close. Every area that we see a gap, we need to be standing in, we need to be praying in, we need to be laboring in. And when you look at this framework, you see because of the reconciliation with God, we can proclaim this message wherever we go. Because of the reconciliation with God, we can demonstrate this new humanity together. Because of the reconciliation with ourselves, we can become secure to love others. We can embody that wholeness that other people are so desperate to want to see. And because of God reconciling all things, we can stand with authority to proclaim God's kingdom come. And at the end of the day, whether we see it or not, we're involved in the work. And when God comes back to make all things new, we can say, we did not side with self-preservation. We did not side with our own power. We did not side in trusting in ourselves, but we sided with justice for the oppressed, liberty for the captives, proclaiming for those who are marginalized, they may find healing in their brokenness, and that together, as wounded healers, we may journey through this holistic vision of reconciliation for the holistic discipleship of our churches to see God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. To God be the glory. Amen.